Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. This is a podcast for middle managers who want to develop themselves, develop their teams, and improve their results. Leaders, you're told this all the time. You got to have a clear vision. How do you do that? You got to set goals all the time. But how do you do that? How do you accomplish them after you set them? Leaders, you got to build a great culture. But how do you do that? Leaders, what's your brand look like? What's your store's brand look like? What does your organization's brand look like? How do you even get started? Well, I have to tell you, I got the founder and CEO of Lone Fur Creative, Tyler Pigott, on the podcast today, and he dropped a lot of knowledge on what he's done with all of that and what he continues to do. You don't want to miss a second of this. Let's get at it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Leading from the Middle podcast. I have to say, I have got an inspirational leader for you tonight who's going to really target some specific things that really help you build your business, build your brand, build your leadership style, build a great culture, all the things that he's living and breathing every single day. So without further ado, I want to introduce the founder and CEO of Lone Fur Creative. Tyler Pigott is in the building. Well, we're not really in the building, but he's in the building.
Yeah, we're in like the, hypothetical building. It's
the
great,
virtual building, absolutely.
Yeah.
Tyler, it is so great to meet you and have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. Thanks for having me in this conversation. I'm pumped to. I'm hoping I can match your energy and excitement to be here, and hopefully leave a couple valuable things that at least that I've learned along the way. And if it helps people fall on their face a couple times less in life, then that's the goal. So
No
I love
doubt.
it.
No doubt. Oh, I'm sure that's a given. I'm sure. I am so anxious to hear your backstory and what led you to do what you're doing. Tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you landed where you're at today.
Yeah. Let's see. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, so was part of my dad grew up in an organization, a vocational school, 600 employees up and down the West Coast. And that kind of went a little bit sideways, early 2000s, kind of years when I was just finishing up college. And I got the opportunity to jump in kind of in the corporate space. And so from that, so learned a lot in that and worked for a family business kind of through high school and college. And then jumped into the corporate space, a lot of like kind of broadcast communications, PR, a lot of things in that vein for the first couple of years. And then kind of previous to this, I worked for an investment group launching products in the national space up and down the West Coast, and some kind of more towards the East Coast and the East-West kind of thing. A lot in the consumer space, consumer packaged goods space. And so learned a ton about brand creation, about value creation. When you work for investors, it's a whole different game than if you're just kind of out there bootstrapped. Yeah. And it's not, one's not better than the other. There's lessons on both sides and such, but you definitely learn a lot about building something out there when you've got kind of some horsepower behind you, if you will. Yeah. And so learned a ton about that, which was a blast. And then I had young kids and kind of got tired of spending 2-3 weeks a month on the road. And so, I'd like to say I kind of swung the complete opposite direction and started my own gig, remote company before it was cool, and out of my basement. So it was an entertaining experience. But that was back in 2014. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything, but primarily all in like that kind of like branding, sales, marketing, communication space. So it's been an entertaining last 20 years.
That is so awesome and an amazing story. I love that you've kind of touched so many different things. Any lessons along the way that you could say, darn, man, I would have done that a little differently, or what lessons did you learn along the way?
Man, we could start like a whole Netflix series probably on different lessons, but a couple like that come up, top of my mind, would be, I think it's cool to have a diverse background. Like, I think you really don't know what you're good at or what you really enjoy entirely until you start dabbling in different things, whether that's, hobbies and side things, or it's, full court press in a career, or, different things like that. And so I remember kind of early on, someone encouraged me that, hey, find something you enjoy, but that also mix other things in it, because sometimes you get kind of really rote and routine and in a, skill set or something you're doing, and you don't really know that maybe there's something else out there that you haven't explored yet. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I think just, taking those opportunities and jumping into different things and being willing to not be good at something, oftentimes all
Yeah.
of us are afraid to
It's
jump into
hard.
something because, we're not good at it, or we're learning it or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like has been a really important, I guess, kind of lesson or takeaway from the last, 20 plus years,
Yeah.
is just trying lots of different things. And then you take the different, learnings from that past opportunity into the next one, and kind of keep getting better at it. And one of the things I learned early on was that I have a pretty hard time, like I have a hard time following rules, if that sounds funny, but working in the corporate space, kind of staying within the guidelines, have not been great at. And so hopefully I continue to be a successful entrepreneur, so that I don't, because no, I don't want anybody to listen to this if they're trying to hire me into a corporate space. But but I kind of just learned early that, I really am motivated and driven by having big goals out there that I'm going to, kind of reverse engineer a plan and chase towards them. And so that's something I feel like I learned in the kind of launching of different brands. It
Hmm.
just was really motivating to me to start with essentially like nothing, and besides like a little test market kind of results, and figuring out how to get into different, whether they're stores or online retailers, or launch different product variations. And that was really motivating to me. And so I kind of got to be a little bit of an entrepreneur in the mix of another organization, which then kind of got that fire stoked, if you will, to jump out on my own. So
I love
yeah.
that. Those are two great, not only lessons, but two great pieces of advice. The first one of being a little bit diverse in everything,
Yeah.
and then the second one about you know uh, uh, not being afraid to go outside the guidelines.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that they're not all, but a lot of corporations are missing that, today, of
Mm.
that innovation and being able to say, and you're recognizing and saying, you know what, then I'm going to be on my own. I love that. Um, I love that. Um,
Yeah.
it takes some time, Tyler, to tell us what Lone Fir Creative actually does.
Yeah. For in a nutshell, we're a marketing agency.
Mhm.
And so we kind of have two sides of our business. One side of the business is kind of that brand positioning, brand strategy, brand messaging, help you figure out where you're going, identify the problem that you solve for your customer base. And then, kind of rolling that out into your, public facing materials, marketing, sales, slicks, those types of things. And then the other side of the business is, kind of that lead generation, brand awareness, demand generation, kind of that amplify your brand and provide more opportunities or help you get in front of more customers. So kind of two different sides to it. It's probably about a 50-50 split usually. One oftentimes leads to the other, but sometimes we'll kind of jump in on either side. Primarily working in the B2B space, and like technology companies and technology platforms and health tech platforms and those types of businesses. Variety of tactics, campaigns, activities, all sorts of things, as one does in the marketing space right now. I feel like it changes about every 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you got some of the same frameworks and principles that you run down, but the kind of activities and tactics that follow those oftentimes will change based on, whatever can be economic things, it can be digital platform things, it can be regulations. There's all sorts of different things that kind of get thrown into the mix for it. So it's made it fun. It's made it entertaining. It's made it, there's the element of marketing. There's not really any guarantees in marketing. And so it's fun. The element of having to figure something out and constantly be problem solving has kept me alive for a long time, just as, as far as engaged and exciting. But then it's also been really fun to build a team around that, and
Yeah.
kind of been attractive to those other types of brains that come in and like to solve problems and serve clients and that type of thing. So I don't know, that kind of is a general swath, I suppose,
Oh, that
of
was
what we
perfect.
do.
No, that was perfect. I probably want to. So I have a bunch now of questions because I got to get your advice on, like, because we've listened to you now for 10 great minutes, and really talking about your journey and being
Sure.
involved in a little bit. So many great things there. And certainly the leadership is just oozing out. And so now I really want to dig in just a little bit. Let's
Hmm.
start with problem solving, because that excites you to be able to solve a problem. But a lot of leaders, I find, Tyler, run the other way at
Hmm.
times, or find someone else. to solve the problems,
Hmm.
what are a couple of pieces of advice for leaders, especially leaders just starting out, on how to really embrace problem solving, and what would you advise them on what road to go down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a couple of things come to mind, I suppose. I would say, really hunting down like clarity around what's the problem you're solving.
Mm,
I think that
yeah.
oftentimes people can, I mean, I follow this all the time where, you kind of, you get overwhelmed by or inundated by topics or things happening or bad news or whatever it is within an organization. And it's oftentimes really hard to kind of sift through and navigate to figure out, hey, well, what is the actual problem that needs to be solved here? Um, and so I think that that's helpful just to get real crystal clear on the problem because it then does help you figure out how you're going to actually solve that problem.
Hmm.
I think as you're building a team, just another thing that kind of comes to mind, it's really helpful. Like I'm a natural solver, so my knee-jerk reaction for me is to solve problems. When you build a team that's also good at solving problems, you can't always solve them for them. You do have to let other people solve them. And so there is that balancing
Right.
act to
Yeah.
identify which are the ones that, need the energy from the leader and which are the ones that need more kind of like the guide rails, like, hey, I need to set up guide rails so that other people can come in and help solve some of these problems. And it's hard to know which ones are which. I kind of I've leaned on the I don't know if you've seen the playground study, but there's one I read back in 2015 when it came out, and it basically, long story short, there was two different studies. One with a bunch of grade school kids
Oh,
came
yes.
out to recess,
Yes.
and they came out, the bell rings, whatever, they come out there, and then they stay real close to their supervisors and chaperone, whatever you want to call them, that are out on the recess kind of playground with them. And then the other side is the similar group of people, same kind of ages and those types of things. And they go out, the bell rings, and they just run and spread out and have a ton of fun. And the difference between the two sets was one had a fence around the end and one didn't. So
Mhm.
one knew where the boundary was and knew that they could go all the way up to the boundary and really enjoy the whole thing inside of there, versus the other one was like, I'm not sure how far I can go. And this is kind of scary. And there's some unknowns and I don't, there's not real clear boundaries. And so I found as a leader like that kind of mental, I'm just a visual guy. And so that for me was very clear of, oh, I need to work really hard when it comes to these problem solving to in an organization to go, hey, I need to help really establish boundaries. Here's the area where you play. And that comes down to job titles and individual roles and vision. And I mean, so many different pieces to that. But I think from a problem solving standpoint, really, again, back to clarity of what's the problem you're solving. And then is that something that you dig into as the leader? Or if it's something that your team solves, man, how do you really create that environment and space and kind of that clear boundary system so that people can really can run and you can get, I hate saying this, but you can get as much out of them as you want as a
Yes.
leader. But a
Yes.
lot of it, you just have to create that space for them. So I don't know if that answered your question. I'm thinking back to
Oh
your
my
question of the
gosh, yes,
problem
you did.
solving piece, but
Yeah. Oh, yes, you did. And I love it. I loved every second of that because first of all, I could just tell by your reaction, and folks that'll just listen will hear it in your voice. You look for that, you're ready to go. And I think that's one of the first steps. But I
sure.
think clarity and figuring out what exactly it is. And I was gonna ask a follow-up question as do you normally get other people involved, but you answered that.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the other great advice you just gave, Tyler, was to be able to go ahead and let that team solve it. And that could be,
Yeah.
you could see it probably 10 miles away and say, and listen, guys, all you gotta do is this. But it
Sure.
probably takes a lot more to kind of take that step back and let them do it.
Yeah.
And so that was great, great advice.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing I wanted to one of the other things I wanted to go into. And your company does this from what I see, Jess, they live and breathe this. You talk a lot
Sure.
about having a clear vision and
Yeah.
a clear vision for your business, a clear vision for every day. And clarify for us what that means to you and how do you get to having that clear vision?
Yeah. Oh man. There are so many different people probably that, I think of like, I don't know if people in the audience have heard of Michael Hyatt, and I know Don Miller's got a framework about vision, and there's
Yes.
there's so many different, Simon Sinek has stuff. Like there's so many different things that you can like glue onto from different frameworks and stuff. And so I'm not going to try to say, oh, Tyler has his own framework, because a lot of the things I've kind of pulled have been from some of those leaders. But I think one of the things that I've found is that if you don't have a clear vision personally, like individually, that then you can apply also towards, a group of people, organization, or team. It's pretty hard to even get out of bed in the days that are hard, because you don't have like that drive or that bigger picture thing that's kind of pulling you to figure out how to get to the other end. If you're just doing one day at a time and are real responsive, just kind of just being the reactionary,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. There's some people that are wired that way, and that's how that's they're doing life, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not one of those, and I can't I don't last very long in that kind of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just, that clear vision really does help draw you through that. We've gone through a real tough season in the last 6 months, through a merger, buying out partners, all sorts of different things, real bumpy. And I think having going back to that vision and fighting for what's the next version of the vision has been really, really challenging as a leader for me, because some
Mm-hmm.
days it's just as like, I don't get it. I don't see it. It's really muddy. It's really murky. It's hard to see, but fighting for it's been helpful. I also feel like it's really hard to build an organization of people when you don't have a vision,
Mm-hmm.
because really what you're doing when you hire someone is you're inviting them into your vision, or inviting them into what it is that you're trying to build. And so if you're a smaller organization, the established companies that have been around for, decades or a century or something like that, their vision's pretty like, hey, this is what we're doing. The vision's bigger than the people that are there. Like it's it's very well established. But in some of the earlier or kind of like, infancy companies, if you will, that are smaller, or that there's, still founder led and those types of things, much of your vision comes from what you're passionate about. It's something you get excited about. It's something that you are driving because, so much of the organization's connected to the founder. And so I think that that's like point one, is come up with a vision that is something that you're passionate about, something that actually turns your crank and gets you excited, because you're going to be the one that is at the tip of the spear when stuff's great and when stuff's really challenging. Um, and then the second piece would be to really, again, I go back to clarity, because you've got to be able to invite people into that vision and have them remember what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't have these, page worth of notes and this, this novel that you try to expect somebody else to remember. You'll remember it as a founder all day long. You wrote it. It's kind of written, inside your brain, but anybody you're inviting into it's going to have a hard time with that. And so really kind of boiling it down into very simplistic, kind of like 3 bullet points, like essentially, where you're going, how are you going to do it, and why, and because of, like, why does it matter? And really kind of boiling it down to that makes it really helpful for the people you're inviting into that vision. So, team members, employees, those types of people can then remember it. So it's kind of, that passionate piece, simplifying it, and then repeating it.
Uh-huh.
Because, we talk about our vision in every staff meeting. I mean, it's just as a regular occurrence. And I always laugh because I just assume people are so tired of talking about where the heck we're
And
going. Why are
Tyler,
we doing
yeah,
this? Yeah, totally. But then I remember, the amount of times
or
if I'm coming into something, how often, I have to hear it. Like how often it has to be like almost, hit me over the head a little bit.
yeah,
And that could just be it could be because of me and my learning style too. But
yeah,
I've just found that repeatability is also then really helpful too, just to getting everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction, whatever analogy you want to use for an organization. But I know we all know the organizations that are all going in the same direction. We all know the organizations that are a little bit dispersed and you can't
yeah,
quite tell
yeah.
whether or not you're consciously looking at it or subconsciously experiencing it in a consumer, like as buying something. You can identify those organizations.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the trick, is to figure out that, how do we get everybody going in the same direction? So
Yeah, Tyler, that was amazing. Just phenomenal advice. But a lot of leaders miss that, and it
sure.
puzzles me that they miss that. I want to stay along that same vein, and I want to talk about branding because I know you
Yeah.
branding from a company perspective and branding businesses, but it's very clear that you have a specific personal brand, and you
Yeah.
probably have all of your leaders that have specific personal brands. I ask this question all the time. Hey, what do you want to be known for? And leaders really
Yeah.
struggle with that. And so,
Sure.
what's some of your advice on branding from a leadership point of view?
Yeah. That's a great question. I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that question. I mean, I think from a leadership point of view, there's some of it that probably comes back to your vision, a little bit.
Yes.
I would love to be known for the guy that can come in and just solve just about any problem, and it's kind of like, hey, if I want someone to count on, I go find Tyler. Like that's kind of like that, But part of that's because, there's an element of my personality that I really do and just enjoy solving problems. I know that that sounds funny, it might sound basic, it might sound elementary, but when, from personally fixing a dishwasher where you saved a couple bucks and you didn't have to hire someone
Right.
to, solving a major like or client challenge for $100 million brand, like there is an element of both of those that provide a lot of like, oh, that felt really good to me. Like that's something I feel like I was kind of put on the earth to figure out or help kind of translate that complexity into the simplicity.
Hmm.
And so I think that as far as like your own brand, again, it kind of does go back to, what it is that you're passionate about or you get excited about. And then I think probably when it comes to branding, it's got to be mixed with kind of some of your values.
Hmm.
And so, excellence is one of my values. I really like seeing things done well and kind of in my brain when you're kind of envisioning an end result.
Hmm.
Usually for me, it's the finished product's incredible.
Hmm.
And then I'm always striving to try to figure out how do I land there. And so that piece is a huge aspect of my personal brand. But that's also, I would also almost say that's a value.
Yeah.
Empathy is another one for me, and I really do value I kind of have replayed the experiences I've had in the corporate space and in community and other areas as well. But what are the times that I've felt, cared for, known, listened to, encouraged, like those types of things as a human, and then kind of going, how do I figure out how to recreate that for people I come in contact with?
Yeah.
And so again, that's, I want to still be known for creating, solving problems and those types of things, but I want to do it with excellence. I also want to do it with empathy. So that means I'm going to bring people along versus just bowl them over and not give credit where credit's due. And, you start to kind of add those things in and you kind of create this, filter, if you will, of what your brand starts to look like. And so I think it takes time. And I mean, I've spent hours and hours and hours and hours journaling and kind of figuring out self-awareness and, meeting with people, reading books, all sorts of things to go, how am I wired? What actually excites me?
Mhm.
And so I think that is part of an evolving process for everybody. And
Yeah.
I think it can change. I've got several people
Oh
I've
yeah.
known in their late 40s that have changed, total pivot in maybe a career thing or a marriage or all sorts of different things. And you kind of have to recreate your brand a little bit. And so it's an ever evolving thing, but I think it kind of has some of those characteristics to it. Some things you're passionate about, a little bit how you're wired, probably, and then some of your kind of values or ways you want to do things that are mixed in it. So I don't know if that makes any sense. I've not been asked that question, but
My gosh. No, oh my gosh. I honestly have goosebumps because you broke it down where it takes time. I think I love that you said that. I'm so glad you said that. But
sure.
you got to put the thought into it and you have to know how you're wired. And then I mean we all know people, right? Someone told me this, good leader told me this years ago that you arrive at a meeting 5 minutes before you physically actually arrive there,
Yeah.
and so okay, Tyler's coming. We know we're gonna have to
Yeah.
say the vision again. Okay, our Kenny's coming. Oh my gosh, he's gonna try to dominate the meeting. He's gonna try.
Totally.
So we just need to have those and be able to just really live that brand and what we want to be known for. You broke it down perfectly.
Yeah.
Um,
I'd add one thing to the end of that, Kenny, because you
yeah.
brought up a great point of like, and I hate to pick on you but you said it as far as like, hey, Kenny's coming. Oh my gosh, he's going to dominate the meeting. I don't know you well enough to accuse you of that, but I think one of the things that I feel like I've had to learn, and this has been a mostly through error, and being willing to listen to people on, is the consistency of your brand. And
Uh,
so, like, because it's pretty dang hard to lead a team and show up different every day. Like, which
yeah,
version of Tyler are we getting today? Like, is he going to
yeah,
be angry Tyler, impatient Tyler, happy Tyler? Like, it's really tough. And so, I've really spent a ton of time trying to go, man, even when stuff's really tough in an organization or personally or whatnot, still trying to show up with my brand.
yeah,
And I know that can sound cheesy maybe to some people. And I'm not saying ignore your feelings, ignore how, what's going on in life. I do believe that you should process stuff and we all have a soul for one reason or another, and I think you're supposed to take care of it in some way, shape, or form. And so
Yeah.
part of that's processing life and how you're going through it. So I'm not saying ignore any of that stuff, but my company doesn't need to be part of me, Tyler, processing a rough event in life. Maybe some of them might be because they're like on an inner circle or something like
Yeah.
that, but like that's not a way that I need to show up. And so I just would add consistency to, like, once you've kind of established, hey, this is the person that Kenny wants to be or the person that Tyler wants to be, how do you keep that? And it's the same way if you think about branding for a company, same thing, right? You want to communicate in your brand voice and your tone and your message and consistency, and you don't use this weird picture over here or this weird picture over there to describe the brand that you've created, right? And so there's
Yeah.
a lot of consistencies across the board, across, between, business and, personal branding. But I think everybody has a brand, and we all know what it is,
Yeah.
by getting to know somebody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that that's helpful to figure it out for yourself too.
Yeah. But that was such a just an important addendum that you added there, because I think one of the things that I've seen leaders miss at times is how much people that show up to work for them want and need that consistency from their leaders. I
Mm,
I once had a leader that told me, "Well, listen, I'm just moody, man. Deal with it." And I'm like, "What?"
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I understand that. We, like you said, we're human, but people are depending on you, and
yeah,
they they want to expect a certain something when they show up.
yeah, yeah.
This has been amazing. I want to ask you one more question and then ask you how folks can get in contact you.
Sure.
But I really want to ask you about culture, because you talk
Mm,
about that, and you very purposefully do some things to build a culture within your organization and help other organizations do the same.
yeah.
What's a couple of things? What does a really good culture today in 2023 look like?
Ooh, that's a tough question. It's changed,
Yes.
since me entering the workplace for sure. Um, I think that some of the elements I've kind of mentioned of my brand that I've kind of thrown out here and there probably fit into it in some way, shape, or form. In some ways, kind of become that filter. I think one thing is for people just to remember that culture is worked on. Like, it's not something that just happens.
Hmm.
It can, but you better be prepared for whatever just happens to happen, right? And it might not necessarily be great.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think a lot of the things that we've talked about set culture up for success. So you think about the vision aspect we talked about. You think about the brand of your leaders or your leadership staff or your executives, and how that kind of shines through. I think the consistency we just talked about, like the example you gave of that kind of moody boss or whatnot. That culture is going to be tough. It's going to be really tough to know how to show up in, and it's probably going to be a roller coaster ride, if you will, of a culture. And so I think really spending a little bit of time thinking about what's the kind of culture you want to create. Like, what's for us, I know that I take care of creatives. And I know that oftentimes the creative minds and creative mindsets, and I'm included in that, can feel that roller coaster. They feel differently than some other personality. And there isn't one that's better than another. I think all of us exist for different aspects that we're pushing forward in life to make the world operate. But I also know that I need to create a fairly stable place to function and to work for those creatives. And so I think, like, understanding the types of people that you're going to work with and the types of people in your culture, or the people in your team rather, to create a culture for them to have success in, I think is really important.
Yeah.
Again, there's a difference between culture, like founder level, smaller organization versus larger established organization. The founder drives culture. I think you can't abdicate it. You've got to, run it, and it's more than just, oh, I bought lunch for the team last Thursday. Like, that's not really culture.
Right.
Sure, it's kind of great. Like, that's fun. Hopefully you're able to maybe eat around the same table or something like
Yeah.
that, and that's great.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of intentionality around the culture. One of the things that I tried to decide early on is that I wanted a culture of defending my team,
Mhm.
and a culture of, in this environment that I work in, and kind of the creative, the marketing space, the branding space, some of the work is pretty subjective. And
Mhm.
so we have clients that all of a sudden, they approved the color red for the last 6 months, and all of a sudden they don't like the color red. And so it
Mhm.
can get a little bit, people can get frustrated and point blame and point fingers. And And oftentimes you kind of have to, as an owner, kind of come in and defend some of the team members and such. And so, because again, back to stability, I want people to feel safe. I want the stability of it. And so I think like really spending a little bit of time outlining what's the type of culture you want, and that's different for everybody. I think different people want to be in different kinds of cultures. But I think like one of the core things I've always believed in is that as I am an employer, whether someone works for me for 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 years, 30 years, I want them to leave more skilled, more developed, better contributor to whatever they do next.
Yeah.
And so that means there's training, professional development, opportunities, all sorts of things. But it also means leading with context. And so I really try pretty hard to go, hey, this is the decision we made as an organization. This is why we made it. These are, obviously you're being sensitive to if there's sensitive information, but giving context, because it does help the people around you understand how you make decisions and potentially pull things from that for maybe a decision they have to make or whatnot. And so again, there's lots of different elements to how you kind of create culture, but really just making, in some ways starting with a list of, hey, these are the things I want, and then figuring out how do I activate that? Like how do people see that specific thing in an environment or in a workplace? And again, it takes work and it takes time, and you can blow it up and have to come back to the drawing board, and you can, mess up or go right or left and have to go, shoot, we kind of missed that turn and we might need to go backwards, and all that kind of stuff's okay. But I think it's just, again, the intentionality of it and kind of, and the thought process of it, I think is pretty important. So
that's so awesome. I loved everything you said. Right at the beginning, the first thing you said, I started to chuckle a little bit, because you said, well, first we got to be getting some work done here. Right? Hey, I got a great culture, but we're finishing in last place. We're losing tons of month, right?
Yeah.
But I love how you said that the leader has to drive it, but you also said that you intentionally find out what kind of culture your people want as well, and it could differ on the team that you actually have. And I think all of that was just so important. I could talk to you for the next 3-4 hours, man.
Totally, this is fun.
So engaging. And you have such a unique style and brand that combines I think work excellence, of course, but I think anybody listening to your voice or seeing this is going to be able to tell you care about people. And I think that is why you've been such a successful leader. I could just boil it down. I know you're smart and I know you do a lot of great things, but you care about people. And I love how everything that I asked you came back to your people. So I'm going to be respectful of your time, though. How can people get in touch with you, Tyler?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for saying that. I appreciate that. As far as getting in touch with us, lonefurcreative.com, LONE, and fur like the fir tree, creative.com is our company website. We've got tons of content on there. We're a content marketing squad, so there's lots of things to learn from there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's my first and last name on LinkedIn, and same on Twitter. And then I usually, or at least on some of these podcasts that I've been on, in the show notes, we'll leave a link to do, and we call it a website check.
Yes.
And essentially what it is, hey, if you're interested in, improving your homepage, because kind of your homepage is your storefront, right, in this day and age. And so go in there, throw it in the form. Somebody on our team will do like a Loom video or a Vidyard video and just kind of do a walkthrough and make some suggestions on, hey, what about doing this or changing this or whatever. There's no obligations. We're not hard salespeople. There's not going to be, oh my gosh, I'm going to get inundated. It's just more so, hey, if there's a way we can help you with a couple pointers, then we'd love to. So anyway, so that should be in the show notes.
Absolutely.
But yeah, those are kind of the places: website, a couple places on social, and then that website check.
Awesome. And we'll definitely put that website check link in the notes. So look out for that, folks. Tyler, I really want to thank you for your time. I know how busy you are. I so appreciate all of the great advice that you gave tonight, and look forward to talking to you again.
Appreciate it.
All right.
It's been fun.
Absolutely. Yes, it has. So folks, this is the Leading from the Middle podcast with Kenny and with Tyler. We'll talk to you real soon.